And that's when you wonder if your insurance is paid up.
And that's when you wonder if the insurance is paid up, and you wonder if you're going to get home to see the kids.
I got smitten by acting. I used to go down to the theatre club every Tuesday night and Wednesday night, and then eventually it became every night.
Do this, let me just...
No, I need assistance, I'm afraid.
Good, we'll get you someone. We'll get you someone to help.
I had a great time. I packed everything in my suitcase, and I think the most valuable thing I packed was a typewriter, actually. That's where the Brosnan name comes from, but I come from County Meath, actually. It's very flat and rather dreary, but a good part.
Come to it as a member of the audience, and
You do?
yeah, I do. Otherwise, it'll turn you inside out.
They called him the suavest man alive, the face of James Bond, a symbol of charm, control, and power. But behind the tuxedo and martinis, Pierce Brosnan was drowning in personal loss most people couldn't even imagine. He lost the love of his life to cancer. Then, years later, he lost his daughter to the exact same disease. And in between, Hollywood betrayed him, discarded him when he thought he was on top. At 71, the man who once saved a billion-dollar franchise is now preparing for something that has everyone close to him worried. In just 47 seconds, he went from international superstar to industry ghost. In just one decade, he buried both the woman who made him a father and the daughter who called him dad. Through it all, he kept smiling for cameras, giving the world the illusion of elegance while privately unraveling. The pain never really stopped, it just changed form. And now, as he enters what may be the final act of his life, he's not playing Bond anymore. He's playing himself, a man built from grief, forged in betrayal, and still standing despite it all. What happens when the world's smoothest spy finally runs out of moves? Before the fame and the Bond legacy, Pierce Brosnan was just a quiet lost boy in Ireland, fatherless and overlooked. Born on May 16, 1953 in Drogheda, County Louth, Pierce came into a world that offered little security. His father, Thomas Brosnan, vanished so early that Pierce couldn't remember his face. His mother, May, worked hard as a nurse, but by the time Pierce was 4, even she had to leave for London in search of a better life. That goodbye turned into 7 long, disorienting years. During that time, Pierce was passed from relative to relative, each move tearing away at his sense of home. At school, teachers noted he was bright, but he rarely spoke. He stared out windows instead of making friends. That rootless childhood didn't build confidence, it built armor. For a boy who had nothing and no one, survival wasn't dramatic, it was quiet and lonely. In 1964, everything shifted. After 7 years of separation, Pierce was finally reunited with his mother, who had remarried in Scotland. For most kids, that would be a happy ending, but for Pierce, it was complicated. He was 11 years old, filled with confusion, resentment, and hope, all tangled together. His stepfather, William, wasn't cruel. In fact, he was gentle, the kind of man who took time to show a boy how to fish, but Pierce didn't know what to do with kindness. The breakthrough came when William took him to see Goldfinger. Sean Connery as James Bond filled the screen. Smooth, powerful, untouchable. For Pierce, it wasn't just entertainment. Bond represented everything he'd never had: control, confidence, and charisma. That night, the shy boy who had spent his life hiding suddenly saw a version of himself that didn't need to shrink. He started practicing charm, reading people, learning when to speak and when to stay silent. That single film didn't just plant a dream, it gave him an identity to chase. By the time Pierce turned 16, the dream of becoming someone bigger than his past pushed him to take a risk. He dropped out of school and enrolled in St. Martin's School of Art with no safety net. While other students had family support, Pierce survived on toast, tea, and raw determination. His passion was painting, especially the dark, emotional work of Francis Bacon. Acting wasn't even on his radar. But fate intervened in 1971 when he wandered into a small theater where a fire eater was practicing. Pierce asked if he could try, and just like that, he breathed fire for the first time. The group running the workshop noticed his presence and invited him to join. That accidental encounter led him to the Drama Centre London, where he trained from 1973 to 1976. The training wasn't easy. It was brutal. More than half the students dropped out. The tuition was a fortune for him, but he scraped by, working side jobs and refusing to quit. He wasn't there to be average, he was there to become extraordinary. And somewhere between the fire eating and the Shakespearean monologues, Pierce Brosnan The actor, the survivor, was born. Pierce's first real test came in 1976 when he landed a role in the stage thriller Wait Until Dark as the villain. That performance led to more theater work and small film roles followed, but none of it was life-changing. Then came 1982 and a casting call that should have gone nowhere. Pierce auditioned for a minor role in a new NBC detective show called Remington Steele, but the casting director saw something more. She saw charm, mystery, and a magnetic screen presence that couldn't be taught. Instead of casting him for a one-scene death, they called him back for the lead. It was a massive gamble. The role had been designed for a rugged 50-something American con man. Pierce was 29, Irish, and unknown in the States. When the show premiered, it exploded. Within a year, 15.6 million people were tuning in every week. Suddenly, Pierce Brosnan wasn't just a working actor, he was a star. But that spotlight came with a strange twist. It nearly cost him the role that would define his career. While his professional life was rising fast, Pierce's personal life found an anchor through a woman who would change everything. In the late 1970s, Pierce met Australian actress Cassandra Harris. Their connection was instant. Cassandra had just come out of a divorce and was raising 2 children, Charlotte and Christopher. Most men might have hesitated, but not Pierce. He stepped in heart first. They married in December 1980, and Pierce didn't just love Cassandra, he embraced her children as his own. When Cassandra's ex-husband passed away in 1986, Pierce legally adopted both kids. They took his last name, but it was more than a signature. It was a promise. In 1983, they welcomed their own son, Sean, making them a family of 5. Something remarkable happened in 1981. Cassandra was cast as a Bond girl in For Your Eyes Only. While she filmed, Pierce visited the set, and that's where he met Albert Cubby Broccoli, the producer who held the keys to the Bond franchise. Cassandra told Broccoli that Pierce had something special. The idea of Pierce as Bond began there, long before it became real. In 1987, while Pierce was filming in India, Cassandra began feeling unwell. What doctors first thought was exhaustion turned out to be ovarian cancer. Not early stage, it had already spread. The disease that had killed Cassandra's mother had returned, and this time it was coming for her. For 4 years, their life was redefined by hospital visits and chemotherapy. Cassandra endured 8 surgeries, her hair fell out, her body changed, but her spirit refused to break. Pierce was always there, unwavering. Their son, Sean, just a little boy, would sometimes pretend to be a doctor trying to help his mother. Cassandra refused to die in a hospital. In December 1991, as they lay in bed together, she whispered, "Please, darling, don't worry. It's just a life winding down." On December 28th, she passed away in their home with Pierce and her son Christopher by her side. She was only 43. In an instant, Pierce went from husband to single father of 3. The grief was so deep, he said, it nearly drowned him. 3 years after Cassandra's death, the opportunity she had always believed in arrived. In 1994, Pierce was officially announced as the new James Bond. For most actors, it would have been the moment of a lifetime, but for Pierce, it was complicated. Cassandra had wanted it for him more than he had dared to want it for himself. Taking on Bond wasn't just a professional victory, it was a tribute to her. But the stakes were massive. MGM was on the brink of collapse, the Bond franchise had gone dormant, and the new film GoldenEye was a gamble. Pierce knew the pressure, and yet he delivered something unforgettable. He did 90% of his own stunts, including a bungee jump off a 220-meter dam that was so dangerous insurance companies refused to cover it. The film exploded at the box office, earning $353 million worldwide. GoldenEye didn't just resurrect Bond, it reinvented him for a new generation. Over the next 8 years, he starred in 3 more Bond films: Tomorrow Never Dies, The World Is Not Enough, and Die Another Day. Combined, they made over $1.2 billion. But just as he had reached the height of his power, Hollywood was already preparing to betray him. After 4 massively successful Bond films, Pierce thought he had earned his place in the franchise's future, but in 2004, while filming in the Bahamas, everything unraveled in under a minute. His phone rang. On the other end were the Bond producers, and their message was shockingly brief: "You were a great James Bond, thank you very much, goodbye." The call lasted 47 seconds. No warning, no explanation. The truth came out later. The producers had already been screen testing other actors for 2 years, all while letting Pierce believe he was still their Bond. Die Another Day had made $431.9 million, the highest-grossing Bond film at the time, and yet it wasn't enough. The fallout was devastating. In just a few days, 3 movie deals collapsed. His asking price plummeted from $12 million to $3 million. He was labeled too Bond, too iconic to cast in anything else. That wasn't just professional disappointment, it was heartbreak. In 2013, just as Pierce was beginning to piece his life back together, history struck with cruel precision. His daughter Charlotte was diagnosed with the same disease that had taken her mother 22 years earlier. Ovarian cancer wasn't just a diagnosis, it was a family curse repeating itself. Charlotte had always been warm and devoted to her 2 children. She fought with grace for 3 years. Pierce was shattered. He had seen this before, every painful scene, every fading day. But this time, it wasn't his wife, it was his daughter. On June 14, 2013, Charlotte got married to her longtime partner. 2 weeks later, on June 28, she passed away in London, surrounded by her family. She was just 41. Pierce had buried his wife at 43. Now he was burying his daughter even younger. At a cancer fundraiser the following year, Pierce stood on stage and said, "I held the hand of my wife as cancer took her life, and just last year, I held the hand of my daughter as she died from the same wretched inherited disease." His voice cracked, because it wasn't just a speech, it was a confession.
How did you deal with loss? You lose it, and you have to be strong enough to lose it, to find it again.
Pierce had found love again with Keely Shea Smith, the woman who stood beside him through the darkest days. They met in 1994 at a beach party in Mexico. She was a journalist, unbothered by fame, and their connection was instant. She became his rock. They married in 2001 at an 800-year-old Irish abbey. Together they had 2 sons, Dylan and Paris, and began a new chapter. But the fairy tale didn't stop the tabloids. As the years went on, Keely's body changed, and suddenly she became a target. Online trolls mocked her weight with cruel headlines. But Pierce didn't stay silent. In a now famous post, he wrote, "I love every curve of her body. She is the most beautiful woman in my eyes." He didn't just defend her, he worshipped her. In 2024, Keely responded in her own quiet way. She transformed herself, not for Hollywood, but for herself. That August, she and Pierce celebrated 23 years of marriage. At their anniversary dinner, Pierce toasted her as his compass, saying, "You are my north, my south, my east, and my west." In a world that had often tried to break them, they had become each other's peace. Not all of Pierce's family weathered the storm with grace. His adopted son Christopher, once full of promise, was unraveling. After Cassandra's death, Christopher was just 19, old enough to understand the finality, but young enough to be shattered by it. At first, he seemed to channel his pain into purpose, working behind the scenes on Pierce's Bond films. But grief doesn't follow a schedule. By the mid-1990s, the cracks began to show. There were DUIs, jail time, and then came the substances, a spiraling descent into London's dark underbelly. For years, Christopher vanished from public life. Then, in June 2024, paparazzi caught a rare glimpse. Christopher, gaunt and pale, exiting a London grocery store alone. He was 51, a shadow of the young man who once stood beside his father. As the world applauded Pierce's roles, he carried this quiet, lingering failure in his heart. At 71, Pierce Brosnan isn't slowing down, but he's no longer chasing Hollywood's approval. After losing the role of Bond and burying 2 of the most important women in his life, the spotlight doesn't shine the same way. Yet he continues to work, not out of ambition, but out of something deeper. In 2022, he re-emerged as Dr. Fate in Black Adam, bringing gravitas to the DC universe. But even as fans cheered, those close to him noticed something else, an undercurrent of reflection, of preparation. This isn't just another chapter, it might be the closing act. Behind the scenes, Brosnan has become more focused on causes than scripts. A UNICEF ambassador since 2001, he's marched with Greenpeace, raised millions for cancer research, and advocated tirelessly. He's no longer the man in the tuxedo, he's the man in the trenches, using every inch of his fame for something that matters. Those closest to Pierce say he's been different lately. More introspective, more focused on legacy than roles. He's turned down multiple film offers. He's spending more time with his family and his sketchbook, returning to painting, the passion he once abandoned. And that's what has people wondering, what comes next? Pierce's story isn't just about Hollywood. It's about endurance, the kind that isn't flashy but quiet, relentless, and deeply human. He wasn't handed anything. He lost his father, his mother to necessity, his wife to cancer, and his daughter to the same cruel disease. He was fired at the peak of his success, and yet he kept showing up. His journey from a forgotten Irish boy to a global icon wasn't built on luck. It was carved from grief, stitched together by loyalty, and held in place by the love of those who believed in him. Today, as fans revisit his work, they're not just watching an actor. They're witnessing a man who refused to be broken, a man who turned every loss into a reason to keep going. Pierce may have played James Bond, but it's the role he never auditioned for. The grieving husband, the protective father, the enduring survivor. That defines him most. And if this is indeed his last act, then it's the most powerful one of all.
You better straighten up and fly right and just be there for them and put on a brave face and meet the day.